everybody, to BookEnds Online Edition, produced in the Wadena County by the Wadena County Historical Society and Travel and Storyseller in collaboration with New York Mills Regional Cultural Center. BookEnds is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Five Wings Arts Council, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. BookEnds programs from earlier months are now available on the website of the Wadena County Historical Society at www.wadenacountyhistory.org. Today's program will be also available on the website shortly. This month's speaker is Debra Eckerman Pitton. In 2010, Debra led a group of healthcare students and education students to Peru and I'm guessing Machu Picchu. I've never actually heard it pronounced out loud. I've only read the words. When rain swelled the mountain rivers and flooded downstream villages, the group was trapped. They struggled to remain together as they waited to be evacuated. Her true life adventure book is called No One Left Behind, an unexpected educational adventure in Machu Picchu. Where am I? Debra Eckerman Pitton is a department chair and professor of education at Gustavus Adolphus.
Gustavus Adolphus.
Thank you. Gustavus Adolphus College in St. Peters, Minnesota, and specializes in instructional methodology. Next month's BookEnds on February 13th will be an interview with Peter Guy, author of Northernmost. If you have questions for the author, feel free to enter them through chat on the side there. And the books are available, as always, through Gillette at Travel and Storyseller. Her website is www.travelandstoryseller.com. Now, let's welcome Debra Pitton. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. One of the things I always like to ask people is, do you like to travel? Are you a traveling person yourself? Raise your hand. You like to travel?
Oh, yeah.
So have any of you had Machu Picchu on your bucket list? A few people. Okay, well, good. You'll get to kind of travel there vicariously today. So I'm going to share my screen. I've got some slides, and I'm going to use the slides, which are more fun to look at than me. So we'll use that to kind of talk about the book, why we went. I'll read a little bit at the end and have time for questions. My book is called No One Left Behind, and I wrote this when I had taken college students to Machu Picchu and to Peru for some work. I taught at Gustavus for 22 years, and actually I just retired from the chair position in the spring, so I'm easing into retirement now. But I always had an interest in working with students to prepare them to be the best teachers they could be. And so part of that was taking them to international sites. And this book was written because of one of those experiences of taking students abroad. And I wrote this book because when I think about stories, and this is my sort of educational perspective, I consider the work of the psychologist Jerome Bruner, who proposed that narrative is a way of knowing. And he also said that while some things are best learned vicariously or via formal experimentation, our most powerful and long-lasting learning experiences are storied. So how you learn something is a story, complete with motives, helpers, and hindrances. And also, Maya Angelou influenced me in her quote. She says that perhaps travel cannot prevent bigotry, but by seeing that all peoples cry, laugh, eat, work, and die, it can introduce the idea that if we try and understand each other, we may even become friends. Now, at this point, I want to make sure that you all are hearing me. Could I hear a shout out from everybody?
Yes.
Okay, good. Just one, because I can't see you. That's the one challenge of using a slide. So I'm hoping that this will not put you to sleep. You'll all have your eyes wide open if I were to look at you. But for now, we'll take a look at where we went. This is Chimbote, Peru. This is the site of the village where I ended up taking my students. I planned a course that would take college students to work both in the education area, teaching English, and also healthcare and nursing students who would work in the healthcare clinic that they had there. And it was a volunteer course. We have a January course every year that we can prepare for students. And I learned about the needs of this parish of Chimbote, Peru, from an NGO, a non-government organization called Friends of Chimbote that actually is housed in Fargo, North Dakota. And they help provide funds for this area. I was asked to set the course for college students so that they would volunteer in the mission, teaching English and supporting healthcare, by Father Jack Davis, who is the pastor of the community in Chimbote, and originally from Fargo, actually Devil's Lake, North Dakota, and who has been there for a long time. And he comes back to solicit funds and is an amazing speaker. And I happened to be at one of his sessions, and he found out I taught English and as part of my background, and immediately signed me up to go. I was really unsure about the program because the area was very poor. I'd not taken students to a place that was really a third world country before. So I completed a site visit to determine if I really could manage, the course and the experiences. And when I went, I have very little Spanish. So this was a challenge for me because I'm not fluent in Spanish. I have a little bit of background in Spanish. And of course, everyone speaks Spanish. Our goal was to teach English. And Father Jack had asked us to do this because Peru is a tourist destination. And for people who have maybe not a lot of education, if they have English, they can work as tour guides, they can work as taxi drivers. And so it's a goal to have young people learn English. So I went on a site visit to see whether this would be something that would work for students and that would actually be safe and okay for me to take students. And this is a complex that was built by Father Jack where we stayed. When my daughter and I went for the site visit, we determined that this was going to be a go. So I brought students, 21 college students and my colleague, and we had the students living and working right in this poor community. We started out by visiting the community, getting to know some of the people. And as you notice, it's extreme poverty here. The homes are basically what they call estero. It's a kind of reed woven homes. And we found out that this is the students who would be coming to us. This is where they lived, in these shacks. Father Davis had been in Peru since the 1970s when there was an earthquake. He had come to help and ended up staying there, felt a real calling to work with the people and especially the folks of poverty. The extraordinary thing that happened while we were there was the impact of the college students on the community and the impact of the community on the college students. As you can see, this is a soccer field, which is basically dirt. But that was one of the activities that really engaged our students and the people of the community. We played soccer every day after our classes. We played soccer with them. And what did we experience while we were there? Again, this is the first part of the story. It kind of has two parts. Our first part is our volunteering work, and we observed the challenges of those who live in poverty. Again, this is the street across from the mission where we stayed. And you can see that the road's dirt. The houses are very, very simple and not very many cars. There's still a lot of traffic by animal, donkey, and horse. And we saw our children that came to our classes really had nothing to play with. They played with rocks, they played in the streets. Not a lot for these children. And again, we see the homes that the community and most people lived in. Now, this is not all of Chimbote. This is a barrio of the community around the mission called Our Lady of Perpetual Help is the name of the parish that we were involved in. And we learned about the community and its history from Father Jack Davis. You can see him here in this picture and the students as they're gathered because we wanted to know the community as we were working with them. One of the goals of a course like this, it's called the Service Learning Course, where we do service to the community, is to make sure we know the community wants what we have to offer and that we are responding to their needs. And so Father Jack gave us some background of the community. And again, that's where it was reinforced the need and desire for English to be taught to the children. English was taught in the schools to some degree, but primarily was a written program, and they really wanted an oral communication process. So we taught English. Here's me. It was very hot down there, so we all were dressed very casually while we taught. And the students really became engaged with the local youth that they worked with. And this is one of the things that influenced me to write this book. As I said in the beginning, you know, the power of story and the power of travel and relationships that occur really was evident in this experience. And so I wanted to write about the relationships that grew out of our time in Chimbote. And I wanted to share with you some of these images of these relationships and our classes. They had a little library that we would have students crowded around as they learned English. We had primary students in the morning. We learned a lot, or taught a lot through games, hokey pokey, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, learning words to body parts before we started having the students put them together into sentences. We had older students, and we tried to break them down into small groups. So of the 21 students, we tried to break them into groups so that they were smaller, more, not one-on-one, but small groups as possible, and that they would circulate and help. We brought materials with us, notebooks, paper, markers. I had a whole suitcase full of stuff that we brought, so we had some things to work with while we worked with the students. And we did adult classes at night. A lot of the adults, again, also wanted to work. Even working in the mission, they needed to have some English because there were a lot of visitors. Father Jack brought down a lot of visitors, or invited a lot of visitors to come down to see his mission in hopes that they would then volunteer their funds to help support it. And actually, he's pretty successful in getting people to come. Our nursing and pre-med students volunteered. They had a small clinic that actually was pretty well outfitted. They had a connection, again, Father Jack had a connection with some doctors in the Minneapolis area who donated equipment. They had a dental suite as well as a medical suite. It was pretty well established for the area around them. So the students who were thinking of a career in medicine were able to help here. They actually spent a lot of time rolling bandages, gauze for bandages, because they didn't have much. And they found that a little mundane, but again, it reflected the needs of the community. The relationships that grew, as I said, were pretty powerful. The kids loved our students loved them, and they really enjoyed the time they spent together. This was a course where the students were pretty busy. You know, we taught classes in the morning for the young people, through 6th grade. In the afternoon were teenagers, and then at night we taught English classes for adults. And like I said, it really bonded. There was a lot of connection that happened between the students and our Gustavus students. So I had an idea that because we hadn't seen much joy in the lives of these children, that we would take them to the beach. Even though Chimbote is on the ocean, the water is so polluted from fishing, and from they have a fish processing plant that dumps its wastes right into the beach by the shore in the city. No one can swim there. It's polluted. It's not safe. So even though they live on the coast, this community is on the coast, kids had never been to the beach. So we used some of our funds. We had extra funds that we took with us for events that we thought we wanted to participate in. So we took 100 kids to the beach. And here's our students and the young children, many without swimsuits, at the beach for the day. And our college students stepped up, played in the frisbee. We took snacks. We were trying to think what to feed them. And so we actually, my colleague and I bought chickens. And back to the days, luckily, I was a farm grandchild and helped my grandma, scald the chicken, pluck the feathers, roast the chicken. It was quite an experience. The college students said that they didn't think that was quite on the agenda for our syllabus, but it ended up that we did that as well. The last day, When we were leaving, all of our students came, crowded in. It was again, somewhat emotional in the sense that even though we'd only been there a little over 2 weeks, we were spending so much time with these young people, kids and adults, that it felt hard to leave. The mission itself had a rooftop patio area that we often had our classes at night and debriefing. And we talked a lot about the impact and the poverty that we saw and what the students would do when they went back home and how it would affect them as teachers and as medical professionals. So it was hard to leave, but heading to Machu Picchu was on the agenda for our next step. And it was sort of the reward for their hard work, that we were going to take a quick 1 day overnight to Machu Picchu to kind of explore the culture and give them an opportunity for a little bit of fun after all their hard work. But this is where our learning took a turn and became an adventure. And I don't know if you can see the water moving here. This is the river, the Urubamba River, and the railroad tracks that lead to Machu Picchu are right on the banks. So as we went to Machu Picchu, we noticed this river and how powerful it was. And when I had been there on my site visit, it was just a little stream. So traveling to Machu Picchu, I was a little concerned about the power of this river and the fact that flooding had taken its toll on this waterway. It was the rainy season. Peru does have rainy season during January, so there had been a lot of rain. But we were able to get to Machu Picchu, and it was gorgeous. We were so impressed. We had a great guide, powerful experience to be up in the Andes Mountains and seeing this ancient village, this city built so long ago. We were able to spend a lot of time that morning. It had been rainy when we went up the mountain to go to the site, but the sun came out and made for a beautiful experience. There's all of us there, the whole crew, along with our guide, at the base of the mountain. Again, you can see the clouds coming back in. It was the kind of weather consistently raining on and off most days. It would clear up and be super hot, and then we would get rain and fog. While we were up in the mountain, our guides told us that we needed to head back. We had lunch up there, but we found when we came back, the river had risen so high that the buses would not go across. And so we had to walk across a footbridge with the water kind of slamming into the footings of that bridge. You can see again, the water's churning underneath these bridges. So this is the village of Aguas Caliente that sits at the foothills of the base of Machu Picchu. We had planned to stay overnight and then head back. So we had gotten in late the day before on the train because the train was slow due to many mudslides that were on the tracks. We did not know this. We were just having a train ride watching this river. But because we got there late, we decided to go to Machu Picchu in the morning, and then we would leave. We had tickets to leave at the 1 o'clock train. We got back into the village. We had to walk because the buses wouldn't cross the river, and saw how powerful the river was and how much wider it was. We were basically across the street from this river in our hotel. And this is what had happened. The power of the river and the flooding tore out the railroad tracks that led in and out of Machu Picchu. And the thing about this village is it's pretty isolated up in the mountains, and the only way in and the only way out is this train. So when we got back, all of our stuff had been removed from the hotel and was sitting in the middle of the plaza. And we realized that we were stranded because they told us about these train tracks. So we were just kind of stunned at first. We were kind of stunned here at first. And the thing that I asked, again, in sort of an American, I guess, audacious perspective was, okay, so when you get those tracks fixed, because we got to be out of here. We're supposed to leave at 2. And I was told, it's going to take a long time to fix those tracks. This is Peru. Things don't happen overnight. And really stunned me. And all of a sudden I realized that, we were stuck, we were stranded. And we all had just those little backpacks because we had only planned to be there overnight. So we had to figure some things out. Where were we going to stay? We didn't have a hotel reservation. We had been there one night and that was it. So we had to figure that out. We had amazing guides who took us kind of beyond the touristy parts back into the community to find places to stay that were still available. Because at the same time that we had found out we were stranded, there were hundreds and hundreds of young people up in the mountains. It was Christmas break, and they had been hiking and traveling and hoping to get to Machu Picchu. And they brought all of those people in, as well as tourists who had, come by other means to visit. So the little community was suddenly overwhelmed by people, and very few of them could find a place to stay. So we felt lucky that we actually did find housing. We had to be worried about water. We could not drink the water. It just was not purified enough for us. We'd always had bottled water when we'd been in Chimbote. We carried bottled water with us, but we had planned on buying it every day. So we had to worry about where we were going to get the water. We lived very local. This was the view from where we were staying into the kind of the back community of Machu Picchu, of Aguas Calientes. We had to kind of double down. Instead of 2 kids in a room, we had 4. My colleague and I had our own rooms. We now doubled up, trying to make do with what we had, because the ATMs, of course, ran out of money pretty quickly, and there was nobody bringing more money in. So we had little English, no money, no water, and no way out. We also had to avoid what I feared would be chaos because of all of the people that had been brought into the community. They put up tents for them, but there was tension because the Americans were, and probably other white adults, were able to communicate better and were making plans to get out, and many of the other people really didn't have any plans and any way to get out. So there was some tension, and there's more about this in the book. There's a lot of issues with kind of looking at us and wondering, why are you going to maybe get out first? Who are you as Americans to get out first? So I was a little concerned about potential chaos. And there actually is a moment in the book where we almost get into a riot, which seems even more prevalent as we looked at what was on the news the last couple of days. You can imagine having 21 college students in a situation where something like that might happen. We did try to keep ourselves busy. I was very proud of the students who volunteered to help sandbag, so we did some helping. I put a schedule together. We played games, we played charades, we played cards, but a lot of what we did was wait. We had to wait for the U.S. Embassy. We were waiting to contact them, waiting to hear what was happening, what was the process, how would we get our food or water that day. My biggest concern was funding. What do we do? We tried credit cards. Very few places took credit cards, so we had to figure out, and that's another aspect of the book, how did we find the funds that we needed? There also were some pretty dangerous areas because the water kept eroding the sides of the streets up onto, right across from the hotel we had originally stayed at. The downtown was becoming pretty dangerous with the water just ripping out. We saw one day a big tree, a big huge tree right on the edge of the water, just totally get its roots torn out and collapse into this water and go tumbling down this river. So we waited. The State Department had an attempt to get us out. They flew in some helicopters the night before and told the Americans to go to this back gate and they were going to get us out, but it was raining. And because the Andes were so steep and got foggy and misty, once the rains began, there were no helicopters that could fly. So we waited that morning and waited and waited. And before the State Department could come in, the Peruvian army came in to take over. And basically they said to us, excuse me, Americans, you don't get to go first. We have a lot of people here and we will figure out the way that people will be evacuated. So we were now under martial law from the Peruvian army, who, at first made us nervous. But again, we learned so much from the people we were there. The community set out every day rolls. They made these hard rolls that were a very typical thing. And somehow there was enough flour, but there would be rolls and coffee in the soccer stadium in the morning to ensure that everyone had that. They also set up fires in some of the streets with big boiling pots and boiled rice to feed everyone, to make sure that there was food for everyone. When we finally thought we were going to get out after 4 days of waiting, the students were constantly told to be on point, be ready to go, because we never knew when it would be our turn. They started with the older people, and actually there were some folks in their 70s and 80s who had been visiting Aguas Caliente and going to Machu Picchu. They took them out first, and then they would post every day who was next, what age group was next. Kind of like waiting for our vaccinations now, who was going to get them next. And the senior citizens got them first. So, as you can imagine, the 20-year-olds were the last to be allowed to leave. And pretty much everybody else in the village was filled with 20-year-old college students who, as I said, were on their Christmas break and who had been hiking in the mountains and traveling. So there were lots of people this age group. And the concern was that there was agitation even among some of the countries of South America. And so trying to get through these crowds of people that were all waiting at the gate to the train station, it was very unnerving to watch those crowds. So we always kind of took a back side street to sit down on and wait. And the students got, very good at just kind of hanging out and keeping each other entertained and their spirits up. And we played a lot of cards, played a lot of charades, but we did a lot of waiting. When we did get our chance to go, again, we had to get through that gate with all those people. The State Department actually had to escort us through, and that was a little hairy. But we got through, and then we had to kind of run through the jungle way back to where the helicopters were landing. So it almost felt like being in a movie. Who has this happen? Where you're kind of off in a jungle and you're running through trying to get to a helicopter and not miss it. That was our experience as we waited for the rescue. So you can see, again, these are where the helicopters landed is the tracks on the other side beyond where they were torn out. But again, they don't lead anywhere because they ended just a little bit ways beyond here. But the helicopters landed and they would take people out. But they obviously were small, and it took a long time for any of us to get loaded up and get taken out. But it was celebratory when we did get on helicopters, and the students got on helicopters. This was a photo taken by the students themselves. As you can see in the mountains, these are the helicopters taking off. The issue was, and this is a point that kind of rides throughout the book about having the students stay together. But what happened was at the end, I actually got left behind. So everyone else was off in helicopters heading out. But I was still there. So I'll read you a little bit about that in a minute. In thinking about the book and constructing it, a memoir always is something that sort of flows from your own experiences. But if you think about the adventures and situations that occurred daily as I tried to keep everyone safe, that provided the main plot of the story, both in Chimbote and Aguas Caliente. In Chimbote, the community we were in was not safe outside the gates of the mission. There actually were some stabbings that had happened. It was a rough area, but that's why the need was high. So ensuring that the students were always safe, that we went in groups, that was always a primary concern of mine. And yet letting them explore. What did we do on the weekends? We went hiking, we went out in the ocean. opportunities for them to really get to know the country and stay safe. The main conflict arose mainly from the potential threats from others that were stranded, angry tourists, as it also arose from the daily concern as to whether we had enough money for food, water, or lodging. And many times we thought we were going to leave, only to be stymied by the situation. And we had to continue waiting, wondering what would happen, how and when we would all get home. But there were stories of what we learned. The students kept journals. I kept a journal. One of the ways I was able to put the book together was from my journal and also from some of the students' reflections. And their main assignment at the end was to write a reflection about what they learned. And it was really interesting, the comments. Many of them were from the teaching and the relationships, but also there was a sense of, who were we as Americans to expect to get out first when there were all these people from so many other countries? And yet that was the reaction. It was my immediate reaction. Hey, let's go. we got a plane to catch. And it really made us stop and think. We had many interesting discussions about that perspective that we all had. So I felt compelled to pass along these stories of what we learned from our Peruvian hosts. We gained a better understanding and appreciation of people and cultures that are not our own, for sure. And one really important idea that we were left with is that the value of relationships, that we all need to look out for each other and stick together as a goal. And that seems particularly relevant to the times right now. I want to read you a little bit from the book, the prologue, right now. And there's a bow on this book because I was giving it to some of my family members for Christmas. So they all got a book with a bow on it. The prologue. Standing on a small rise along the bank of the rampaging Urubamba River, I looked up at the sky. Mist clouded my vision. Raindrops grew fatter. I squinted into the haze to watch the helicopter take off, the helicopter I was supposed to be on. I told my students never to leave anyone behind, that if need be, they should step aside and let the next person in line board ahead of them in order to stay with another student from our Gustavus Adolphus College class. That was the rule. No one left behind. Yet there I was, left behind to watch an evacuation helicopter roar into the distance, growing smaller and smaller. My anxiety increased as the rain intensified. Standing alone on a little hill in the shadow of Machu Picchu, I realized there would be no more helicopters until the rain let up. 21 students, along with my co-teacher Mary, had just boarded a helicopter shuttling evacuees to the village of Oye Tamtembo. There they would take buses to Cusco and reunite before a short hop back to Lima, and then the 11-hour flight home to Minnesota by way of Atlanta. The evacuation had worked. Everyone was being carried safely in military helicopters. Everyone but me. I got left behind. I shook my head, stifled a cry, utterly alone and lost. I squeezed my eyes to shut and block the tears and sat down on a rock, my head in my hands. I just couldn't believe it. Over and over and over since the disastrous floods had begun, I stressed to the students, we need to stay together. But I screwed things up when I gave up my seat on the last evacuation helicopter to a young Canadian woman frantic at the thought of being separated from her traveling companion. My own directive had failed. Rain collected on the back of my neck, chilling me where I sat. The smell of soggy vegetation, the roar of the river, sensory ambience surrounded me, making it hard to think. I squinted upward at the rocky heights of Machu Picchu and then down the raging river towards the village of Aguas Calientes. I'd have to go back there to find shelter for the night. And the thought of elbowing again through the young throng of young tourists, many hungry, thirsty, out of money and angry, still waiting to leave the flood-raged town, unnerved me. The crowds had been confrontational when Mary and I left with our group of Gustavus Adolphus students. Trying to push back through all those people would not be easy. Anxiety drove the same spine-gripping tension I'd experienced so many times on this educational trip to Peru. Wet, cold, and close to exhaustion, I rubbed my neck and wondered, how did I end up here in the mountain in the Andes alone? So to find out all the details, of course, you'll want to read the book, but I also want to take this time to answer any questions that you have. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if you have some questions or you'd like to know a little bit more about any component of what I just shared. I can't hear.
Yeah.
Okay.
How long did it take you to get onto the next helicopter?
Well, it actually happened pretty quickly. I was kind of heading down the mountain, and because it was raining, they'd stopped bringing in helicopters, but a very small, they called it one of the drug running helicopters. They were very small little bubble helicopters they used to look for people transporting drugs from the US and Peruvian partnership that was working on that. It landed and it would only hold 4 people. So they shooed me onto that with 3 other students that were from someplace else. And they went up, but it was raining and storming, and that little helicopter bounced all over, up and down, all the way across the mountains, up over them. And, you know, it was not exactly the most fun flight I've ever been on. The college students, there were 3 young men from California, and they were like so excited. They're like, wow, look, we can see all this. And I'm like holding my stomach. I am barely able to look out the window. And the helicopter did not take me to where all the other students were. The pilot said that he didn't have enough fuel to land there and then go up again. So he took me all the way to Cusco, and none of my students were there. So that was another part of the challenges I had, was that I ended up in a totally different place than everybody else.
Do you still go back taking students to that Chimbote?
You know, a lot of people thought I was crazy, but I've gone 5 times. So about not every year, but every other year I would take another group. And we never had that experience, although it's always the rainy season, but I always said something weird always happened. We had driving from Lima to Chimbote, you are traveling through a desert area, pretty desolate along the ocean. And we were coming by bus, and we had to stop because there was a wildflower fire that was sweeping across through all the shrubs. And there was nobody to come to put that fire out. So the bus had to sit until the fire went from one side, you know, and all the way across the road to the other side, and just kept going and burning out. And so that was an experience that happened another time. One time I was there, the children gave us the flu, and we were staying in the mission complex that basically had 2 dorms, one for the guys, one for the girls, and there was 1 bathroom that we shared.
Oh.
So having the flu, with that many, and luckily not everybody got it at once. It was kind of a rolling effect. We had about 3 or 4, and then 3 or 4, but we all got it. And it took a little different approach to dealing with students at that point, making sure everybody got healthy again and didn't get dehydrated. So yeah, there's always been a few little different things happening because it is a 3rd world country. But one of the things I found it interesting in the paper this morning, there was an article about Bethel students who'd gone to India for a course in January last year, a photography class, to put together a magazine. And they wanted to take pictures of disenfranchised individuals. And they said, so many times we only look at what is our perspective. And that is why I wanted to take students. And even though it was difficult, the fact is that they came away with a view of the world that students who don't go there didn't have. And we would have reflections at night, not every night, but we would meet up on that rooftop and just talk about the day and their students and challenges. And I would hear things like, I waste so much food in the cafeteria back in college. You know, you get your food along the tray, and I didn't want this to have, so I just dump it in the garbage. And he said, my garbage is more than what these people have to eat. And so getting these students on their own, just by being there, this immersion experience, got them to really reflect on, you know, the benefits of being who they were, of being an American citizen. I mean, the State Department came to get us out. Believe me, there was no other countries whose State Department came to get them out. I think was very powerful. And so I kept going.
Cool. Somebody asked in the comments that she appreciated you mentioning that you focused on what the people really needed and not relying on your own ideas. And she was wondering, was reading the book When Helping Hurts part of your preparation?
Yes, we actually, we read a book called The Peru Reader. It's a big collection of historical pieces, literature pieces, all about Peru. We met for three or 4 days before. That's why we weren't there the whole month of January. The course actually runs all of January, but I always would meet with the students for about 3 days. One, to kind of get them ready, you know, what to bring, prep and that stuff. But also we would read these and discuss them in groups and do presentations. We also did lesson planning before we went, basic lessons in teaching simple words, so that we would do what's called a close, where we'd have in English, I like blank, and then we would teach a bunch of words like I like to dance, I like to eat, I like, you know, chocolate. And so we would use these kinds of systems that are used for teaching English in classrooms. You know, if you have English as a second language, very beginning students who don't have a lot of English skills, I wanted my students to have those things ready. Many of them as education majors. We had about 5 that were seniors who just had their student teaching left to do. They were really good, and they were team leaders for the groups. So we would also at night, they would plan lessons. We had materials that they would use so that, I lost my train of thought here, but basically so that they would be ready and comfortable the next day. Did that answer the question? I'm not sure.
Yeah, she was also wondering about the specific book, When Helping Hurts. And I recall you saying you read 3 cups of tea.
Yeah, we also, we read that while we actually read those while we were there, 3 cups of tea. I wanted them to see that, you know, even one individual can make a difference. And although there's been some controversy about that book and whether or not all of that is as honest as it is, also read a book called Mountains Beyond Mountains, was one I used after this particular January, because I wanted them to read about how one individual can make a difference internationally. So, because a lot of them came away with, and I was worried about them thinking, well, yeah, but what can I do? Yeah, but what can I do? And so the thought is that even in small ways, contributing, you know, financially or volunteering with local organizations or, you know, whatever they could do would make a difference. And many of them said the one thing that they were going to do is to really monitor their own waste. Did I waste food? Am I wasting water? That was really important. So we met before, as I said, now my brain is back on track. We would have these little mini classes, planned lessons, read about the community, read about the history. So we knew a little bit about Machu Picchu. So the students were ready then after, you know, 3 or 4 full days of in class. And then we flew to Lima, and we're just there overnight before we took the bus to Chimbote. And I really wanted the students to have a local experience. So we could have flown to Trujillo, which was much closer, and taken a very short bus ride. But everybody else who's native takes this long bus ride down the coast. So we did that too. It's about a 7-hour bus ride from Lima down to Chimbote. I also wanted them to, you know, to live locally. So, you know, we went out and bought, you know, snacks and stuff. We didn't have to cook for ourselves, which was really lovely because they had a cook at the mission, but we ate what they ate. That included eating food that was a little unusual, ceviche, which is the raw fish that they serve. Also cuy, which is guinea pig. So the students really had an immersion experience. And one more thing in answer to that question about preparing ahead of time and not sort of doing what we want. Again, Father Jack had been there a long time, and he had set up soup kitchens and taking care of food. Think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People have to be fed first before we can start thinking about academically moving forward. And so he had worked on that. He had the hospice, and he said, at this fundraising dinner I was at. He goes, we're ready now to move beyond, ready to look at education because we've been working at really getting the food better. And I was surprised because better, according to what we saw, was still not great. But as he said, it was way better. There had been no sewer systems, there had been no running water. So he was really instrumental in raising funds and getting that going. But I still wasn't sure, did they want English? So when I went for the site visit, and my daughter went with me, and she was a 19-year-old Spanish major, because I was not good enough. I was really worried about my Spanish skills. I mean, I'd taken students to Costa Rica before, but I always would use cue cards. You know, I'd write up notes and stuff like that. But it was also, I had a guide and other places I've been, and this was just me. We had a guide to Machu Picchu, but in Chimbote, it was me. So the site visit, I had her come with me because she had stronger language skills, and that helped. And what I did was I set up a focus group. I asked the people of the mission to bring together parents whose children would be coming and ask them, what do you think about learning English? Is it something that you really want? You know, I didn't want it just to be maybe Father Jack's idea or my idea, or Americans were going to push English on you. And through my daughter translating, which was quite the experience for her, and for me having to listen to my daughter, you know, she had more knowledge. She could tell what was going on more than I did, which was, I found interesting and somewhat annoying at times, but you know, she would tell me what to do. But we really got a strong sense that they did want English. They wanted it because they knew that it would help their children into jobs that were not available at this time because they didn't have English. And they'd seen a lot of people speaking English because Father Jack brought people to the mission. And so they'd heard it, and they saw that that people who had English had been able to take these tourists on travel, you know, around the country. They've been able to work with them. They'd gotten money as even what Father Jack called guards, which were men that would walk with us to the little store to get snacks at night, so that we would have a guard in essence. And it was simply a man who looked pretty fit, who walked with us, and we were able to support him financially. So all of these things Father Jack set up for the people of the community to begin to develop their own ways of earning. And part of it was learning English. So long story long, it was definitely something that they wanted, but I made sure by having that focus group, because I was concerned. I didn't want us to be like riding in on a, you know, white knight on a horse to save them. And I think that's a misconception that a lot of people have when they go to another country to help. You know, we're going to save them. And I said, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to support them and get them interested. And obviously we weren't going to teach them enough English to get jobs right then. But the idea was that we then also took, I went to every garage sale I could think of, and I had shipped ahead of time several crates of library books in English. And so we set up a small library at the parish with multiple, we bought copies of English language, Spanish language dictionaries. So the idea was to encourage the kids, get them excited about English so they would continue to learn it, use that library, and we gave them all their own English book based on the level of their learning to take home with them on the last day. So the idea was to try to continue this process.
So who helped you with your, when you were there, helped you to understand what was going on, that when you went back after your daughter wasn't with you? Well,
during the time we were at the mission, you know, Father Jack spoke English, of course, and he was always very helpful. But what was great was that I had several Spanish majors. Actually, my daughter says, I'll never learn Spanish because I always take someone with me who's good enough that enables me not to learn Spanish. And I had many, each time I've gone, I've had 3 or 4 Spanish majors. And I just say, you're in charge of translating. You're in charge of making sure we know where we're going and what we're going to do. And I would, you know, give them a job or whatever. When we were trapped in Machu Picchu, I would send them out. Like at one point we were supposed to meet the State Department was going to have the helicopters behind this place. I didn't know where it was. And I sent them out because they could ask questions. And I said, there's no point in me going. I will get us lost. So I would send them out, and you know, they were like, yay, reconnaissance. It's like a spy movie. And I said, just go find out.
Yeah.
And they would bring back the information. So I always have had, students who helped me. When we did go to Machu Picchu, we had the tour guide who set this up for us. He came with us. His name was Hector, and he was very helpful. And he had also hired 2 guides who knew Machu Picchu, who gave us the tour. But again, what we learned about the graciousness of these people is that just because the tour was over, those 2 young men stayed with us to ensure that we were safe, that we had, they were the ones who found ways to get us money. They were the ones who found ways for us to find the local food places. I knew nothing. And they were the people who kept us safe.
And did you ever find out, because I know when your book ends, because of the flooding and everything, it would be a while for them, their livelihood was leading tourists in Machu Picchu. Did you ever reconnect with them on any of your subsequent trips and find out how things worked out for them?
I really tried. And I don't know whether they, I had a business card from one of the gentlemen, and it was he and his brother who were the tourist guides, and we could not connect. So I don't know whether they left that business and it did something else. But the other thing, I was always so proud of our students for stepping up when the need was. And when we got back to Lima and we're ready to, or to Cusco when we're ready to go, these 2 young men, Javier and his brother Cristobal, they came to the airport to say goodbye to us. I mean, again, these relationships were so strong. And the students went to the ATM and put together a $500 tip to give to these 2 young men out of their own pockets so that they would have something, because they knew that there'd be no business, no touring. I know that by March, they had rudimentary routes up back to Machu Picchu with buses going around. I think there must have been really long bus rides up to the mountains to get there, but the government did try to get that going. It just took, I think, I'm not even sure when the tracks were finally finished, but they did get tourism back up. They needed it as the #1 income in that area and in Peru as a whole. So they set bus routes up to traverse the area and get people close enough. The tracks had gone out sort of midway between Aguas Caliente and where the tracks started. So they took a bus to one, and they got buses over there. So you kind of, they found a way to get people there without having the train. So it wasn't that long before they got going, but I know that people in the village, they were isolated too. They didn't get food in, but as natives, a lot of them went back up into the mountains to their home villages for a while. So it was a concern we had. Here we all flew out back home, and we left them to the struggles that they had. And so we followed that pretty closely. We actually met, the students and I met multiple times back at college. We did presentations for the rest of the student body, made another collection of materials to send because we were concerned about them. It was hard to get information. In hindsight now, I found some information about what happened, but at the time it was hard to know.
In the book, you talked about like having to plug in a cell phone and the kids having to go to internet cafes. So I'm guessing they weren't all on their own devices like today, or?
No, I had actually asked them, and in hindsight, I changed my mind on this and had them bring their phones the next time, because I told them we were going to be really immersed, and I asked them all to leave all their devices at home, and I had the only cell phone, and it was a college one, and it wasn't the best, and it didn't hold a charge, and I had all sorts of problems with it and trying to communicate, but I'm like, we won't need it, it's not a big deal. And students wanted to contact their parents. There was one little internet cafe that worked sometimes. There was a place that you could get an international phone. Again, all of these were pricey, and the students couldn't get money because the ATMs didn't have it. So they would maybe make a call and pass the phone around really quick, and parents would send messages off to other parents. But at one point, the college asked me to ask them to stop doing that because the parents were getting so concerned. And I sat them down and I said, I know you want to tell your parents what's going on, but it sounds kind of scary when you're not there. So wait till you get home and having dinner that mom made you, and then you tell them all the details. So, but yeah, we didn't have a lot of communication. The phone I had did not work so well, and the students didn't have them. And the next time I went, I said, if you want to, bring it. So they could communicate on occasion. And for emergency purposes, I just thought it would be good to have. Never needed it since, never needed it before, but have added that to my list of things that I don't want to be that immersed that I don't have a way to connect.
Yeah. And you said they also got the senators in Minnesota to act on your behalf?
That was part of their, one of the students, a couple of them were political science, and they were like, let's get the political system going. So they had I think that they had used the internet to connect with a parent who sent a message out, and they started sending messages to Senator Klobuchar, to Waltz, who was a congressman from the area. I'm trying to think who the other one was that was at the time. Yes, Al Franken. And so all of them were contacting the State Department in Lima and saying, hey, come on, let's get these folks out. And again, that it was interesting to get that support. We didn't know what was happening until afterwards. We didn't know that was going on until we were leaving. And one of the people from the State Department asked us to call our senators and let them know that we were out because they had been haranguing them so long and trying to get out. But again, it was a sense of, wow, we had all these people working for us to get us out. We had all the support. What about everybody else? What about all the other young people who were still there? It really caused a lot of really mixed feelings on the students' part. There was a lot of conversation about that as we would, again, sitting and waiting or waiting in the airport terminal as we, gosh, what's going to happen to everybody else? And who are we as Americans to get this special treatment when we're not in our home country? And do we offer the same kind of support to people who come to our country? So pretty powerful in terms of the kind of thinking that happened, and certainly no answers to all of these questions, but just the thinking about it, just the awareness and the fact that students now have a higher level of connectedness and perception about what happens in other countries and what does real poverty look like. Father Jack said, when talking about Chimbote, he said, there's poverty and there's misery. And he said, the people in Chimbote live in misery. And, I'd never seen people living in locations like that, shacks with dirt floors. And I know we have poverty in the US too, but not to that extent on such a widespread perspective. So it was eye-opening. One of the students, as we were leaving Lima and saw the shacks up along the hill, said to me, "What did you get me into?" I said, "Well, you're here now. Here we go." So
it sounds like a really good program there, because I think a lot of kids don't really understand. One of the students you quoted was in medicine, and he said it would make him less arrogant because poverty makes even following the simplest of instructions of treatment plans really difficult. Like, people don't understand that poverty makes something like taking an aspirin 3 times a day difficult.
Yeah, exactly. And the same with learning in the classroom. You expect the students to do your homework. Well, these kids were helping cook or taking care of siblings. There was a lot of things that were going on. And that awareness was, for me, the best thing about the whole experience. Seeing these young people who now, how many years later that I still hear from, who are teaching, who are, some are teaching internationally, some are working in healthcare. After the issues this summer, one of our students who went on this trip, who teaches in Emerson Elementary, started a fundraiser to make sure. She's one of the people that started those fundraisers that gathered all the food for the people who needed it. And I see that as a direct connection to the kinds of things that they experienced. And one could say, well, I don't know if anybody would have wanted to go on this trip if they didn't have a little bit of that altruism in them already. Because I was pretty direct I interviewed every student who was going to go. And I told them that this was not going to be a holiday vacation, described where we're going to stay, asked them to tell me about an experience that they'd had where it'd been uncomfortable, just to make sure that I knew that they would be able to manage. And I was really glad that I did, because of what we ended up experiencing. So I think that maybe the students kind of lean that way, but I've just read about and hear about all the work that they're doing now that they're adults and their families, and it's definitely a thread that weaves through their lives is this experience that they had in Peru.
Cool. Yeah, it strikes me that something like that would be better. I mean, because a lot of people are altruistic, but they do what you talked about earlier. They're going to come in and help you by telling you what you need. And that always sort of bugged me because I was like, how come nobody asks them what they actually need?
Right.
Instead of just assuming they know when they don't have to live that life.
Mm-hmm. And I think that happens a lot with volunteer programs. And I did not want that to happen. But and I think a little of that is just a part of maybe the American mentality. But again, a lot of the students said that they were so touched and impressed by the generosity and the graciousness of the people. And they said, they don't have much of anything, and yet they have these close family ties, and they, really care for each other and manage under such difficult situations. And they said, I don't know how I would do if I were thrust into a situation on a regular basis. So I think it is important that we were meeting needs that they wanted, but it also was important that our students were able to be a part of that experience and learn from that.
Cool. Does anybody else have any questions that they want to ask or type? Anybody? It's very hard.
Yeah, sign you up to go with me. I'm going to sign you up to come with me on my next one. That's one of the things I miss now that I've retired, is that, these January experiences every other year. I started out taking students to London, which was not very scary at all. And then I went to Costa Rica and then ended up in Peru. So I kind of gradually grew my own skills, but I'm feeling a little withdrawal here this January, I'll have to say. My first year not to go anywhere. So
yeah. Have you ever considered doing sort of an adult program? Because I mean, I learned how to teach English as a foreign language. I was going to travel around the world doing that, but my mom got sick, and so instead I stayed and took care of her at the end of her life. But I know it's hard because there's not a lot of programs for adults, but some of us would love to have an opportunity.
Yeah. There are a lot of programs for people to teach English abroad if you were to look online, and I don't know that there's any age group for that. But the one thing that I'm really kind of proud of about this program is that they don't really need us anymore, because one of the things that's happened is that over the course of, that was 2010 until my last visit was 2016, and then I had a colleague who went in 2018. They have developed, through this non-government organization, their own skill sets to do these things. They have hired teachers. They are providing the English program. And I mean, that's what you really want, is that we jump-started and created interest and excitement in it. When we came back the second time, there were students who had been there the first time. Some of them who were with us every single time we came, excited about it and wanting to learn more English, enough that they started their own program. And that's what's great, is that they don't need us. They can do it on their own. And I think that's the best ending of all.
Oh.
So I have to find someplace else to go.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of need around the world.
Yeah. So the
God bless you and the work that you have done and started.
Well, there's a lot of this that happens and goes on. And I think that it's important to let people know the value of this travel and the impact that it has on our young people, to be open-minded and outside of themselves. So
I spent 2 weeks in Ecuador and had some of the similar experiences.
Yes. Yeah.
I flew home but I flew to the major airport in a little twin-engine plane with the propellers over the mountain ranges. And I thought, please God, let me get home to tell the story.
You have to have a lot of trust in transportation systems that are not the way we're used to, that it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Yeah. Oh, good for you. I think, again, I hope to continue to do this once we can get out and about, and we'll see what else I can be a part of. So thanks for listening. I hope you read the book, tell others about it. And like I said, for many reasons, I've had people say, oh, it's a fun adventure. And that's good. But I also have others say, oh, but gosh, look what people learned. So I'm happy that it sort of has a blend of both.
Well, thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Yeah.
Thank
And just, this
Thank
is what
you.
the book looks like.
Thank
And
you.
you can get it. Do we have it at the Wadena County Historical Society gift shop as well, or just through Gillette?
You can through Gillette, or you can contact the Historical Society and we'll contact Gillette.
Okay.
So,
So for anybody
Awesome.
who's interested.
either
All
way,
right.
thank you so much.
Thank you.